Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to the class. I really appreciate your attendance to the lectures and also the tutorials throughout the semester. And you guys are very the frequent participants in all the lectures and tutorials. Thank you so much. So today in the lecture, in the first part, we are going to briefly discuss the lecture 12 topics, other assurance services. And I need to let you know, so this part is not examined. So I'm going to keep this one as brief as possible, but still there's some interesting information here. After this part, we are going to we are going to do the first part of revision. Because in the last few weeks, I think we are sort of have a very long break. We skip two. We have a break, 1 week break. We got 1 week only recordings available due to the public holiday. And in the last, and also in the previous 3 weeks, we only have lectures and we don't really have tutorial because tutorials were occupied for the oral presentations. So I believe we really need a big revision session. So that's why I decided to have 2 revision weeks. This week, we do partially with part 1 revision, and next week we are going to do a more extensive part 2 revision as well. But if you think you have understood the basic knowledge in this unit, if you think your knowledge has been sufficient, actually don't have to worry too much about those revision sessions. Okay, so now let's start. So the first part is about other assurance services from lecture 12. So in the prior lectures, the focus of all the topics from the whole semester was basically about the financial statement audit. Is that right? But here, in this week, our topic is about other assurance services, which actually means the assurance services other than the historical financial statement audit. So we are going to quickly go through those key areas in very brief words. So one thing we want to emphasize is for the assurance services, especially the assurance services other than the financial statement audit, they are regulated under this regulatory framework. So the standard framework. So for assurance services, we have standards on review engagement and also standards on other assurance engagements. For other engagements without the assurance, we also have standards on related services for engagement other than audit, review, and other assurance engagements as well. So in Module 1, as we could see from the prior figure, so also the financial statement audit, although the financial statement audit is still the main focus for the auditing practitioners, but we now actually could observe other assurance services and other engagements other than assurance services have been more and more popular and more important for the profession, especially for those accounting firms. If you could see the names of the Big 4 accounting firms or the Big 8 or Big 10 accounting firms, you could see actually now they have username as consulting services. They don't label themselves as an auditing service anymore. They believe they are more about consulting rather than doing auditing, because for a lot of them, I think consulting gives them the majority of the revenue, and auditing tends to be the second source of revenue now. But it means the auditing is not important to them. Maybe not, because especially for us, for our observation during the COVID-19. So the other consulting services could decrease very substantially in special economic situations, but auditing is a kind of stable business for them, because auditing service is required by the capital markets and also required by a lot of information users, right? So, and also for the financial statement audit, they are providing the reasonable level of assurance, but for the review services and also for most of the other assurance services, usually they provide limited level assurance. And if it is about the factor finding agreed upon procedures, of course, as we mentioned before, we don't, so there's no assurance in those kind of factor finding agreed upon procedure engagements. So in the next few modules, we are going to talk about different types of services provided by those accounting or consulting firms. So in module 2, the first type is about the special purpose audit engagement. The special purpose reporting is actually correspondent to those general purpose financial reporting and also general purpose audits to the general purpose financial statements. So if we say the general purpose financial statement is intended for the presentation to the wider group of users, usually the shareholders, the wider public. Now the special purpose financial statement is a financial report that is intended for the presentation to a limited group of users. And usually the special purpose financial statement could accompany a complete set of general purpose financial statement, or it could be presented separately. Really depends. So the special purpose statements is usually required by some special parties like the government entities, and is intended to present a specific set of information in a predetermined format. And information required and the reporting format used is laid out in the special purpose reporting framework as specified in WASB 1039. So the special purpose financial statement actually is would usually about the certain situations, for example, the taxation purpose, tax reporting, bank reporting, or in some special industries. So those special purpose financial statements are labeled as serving the special needs of some special parties. But as I think probably you learned that from the other units. Actually, for example, in AYN 418. So actually, the special purpose financial statement has attracted a lot of debates now in the practice because it provided different sets of financial requirements. And the information might not be very consistent with those general purpose financial statements. So it actually gave a lot of opportunities for the directors to manipulate the information as well. So if you want to know more about the special purpose financial report, you can go to those media discussion as linked. But for the auditors, when they audit the special purpose financial reports, they are going to follow the ASA 300 series, what we could see is actually the predominantly the fundamental theory, fundamental procedures of the special purpose audit engagements will be very, very similar to what we learned in this semester. But we know the subject matter is the special purpose financial statements. And also the special purpose financial statement, the level of assurance really depends on the engagement, on the contract. Okay. All right. The other part we want to discuss is the review of financial reports. I think we discussed that before. I just want to emphasize in terms of the review engagements, what is the level of assurance? Is anyone answering the question? So for review engagement, the level is limited assurance. So because the limited assurance, sorry, because the level assurance is limited, so of course the evidence collected will be also limited. So the major evidence will be from the inquiries and also analytical procedures. And also for review engagements, the conclusion, the audit opinion is expressed as a double negative form. That is, so in our view, nothing has come to our attention. The reviewed financial statement is not true and fair, right? Do you remember? Actually, we discussed that in lecture 1. So I'm not going to expand that. Okay. So for review financial reports, we are using the SRE 2400 series. And here is an example of the review report. You can, if you're interested in that, you can read it of the class. Now, module 3, agree upon procedures. I'm not going to get into the detailed slides here in this module. So I just want to ask you a few questions. What is the level of assurance for agree upon procedure engagements? So no assurance has been provided. So who will be reported by the auditors in terms of the agree upon procedure engagement? To the shareholders? To the directors? To the management? So yearly it will be reported back to the directors, but here the directors will be the representative of the management, the senior management, or the internal parties of the company rather than be the representative of the shareholders, right? So the agree upon procedures are basically a factor finding conducted by the professional accountants based on the criteria provided by the company itself. Okay. So for details of these agree upon procedures, you can have a following up visit to those following slides. Okay, module 4. So prospective information assurance and also assurance over internal control effectiveness. So what is the prospective financial information? Just by the, from its title, we know those information will be prospective information. So will be projected or forecast financial information. In other words, that will be predictions about the future. If it is about predictions about the future, yearly, so the prediction of the future performance, future position, will be based on a lot of assumptions. That is one feature of the prospective financial information. And also, a lot of statements or the statements or just description in this type of information will be hypothetical because they haven't happened. So due to the special characteristics of the prospective financial information, can you let me know what is a more reasonable, more likely level of assurance if there is assurance over prospective financial information? High level or limited level? So for prospective financial information assurance, usually it is a reasonable level of assurance or the limited level of assurance. Can you answer the question? Limited. It would be more likely to be limited level assurance because the auditors would usually feel it's very hard to provide high level assurance over a lot of assumptions, over a lot of hypothetical courses of actions. This hasn't been happened. This has been very uncertain and very risky if they issue high level of assurance to those information, right? So normally that would be limited level assurance for prospective financial information. And the standards will be usually about, will be usually from ASAE 3400 or 3450. The other important type of other assurance service is about assurance over internal control effectiveness. So actually the audit over internal control effectiveness has been quite popular around the world. It's not very uncommon. So like this type of assurance over internal control has been required in the US, has been required in Taiwan, has been required in China, has been required in many other countries, but not in Australia. Okay. So if your version is not just about the Australian auditing, you must know actually internal control audit is not very strange for all the auditing practitioners. And also in Australia, the large companies may also ask assurance services over their own internal control, even if it's not required by the regulators. Okay. So when we talk about internal control, we know, so the underlying reporting framework is usually from the COSO framework, right? So the report of internal control will be based on the COSO framework, and auditors will use that as a reporting framework, and also following the assurance or the assurance standards to do their audit. So in the assurance over reports on internal control effectiveness, so the level of assurance could be high level or limited level. Really depends on the conditions, terms and conditions required specified in the engagement. And if it is in the US, for example, usually that will be your reasonable level of assurance. one thing I want to emphasize for assurance over internal control is there might be two types of assurance for the internal controls. One situation is a company, the directors prepare the report on the internal control, and then auditors provide further assurance over the reports prepared by the directors. The other situation is the company do not prepare a separate report on its internal control, but auditors are asked to provide assurance over the overall internal control effectiveness, the overall performance of the internal control effectiveness. Did you see the difference? So in the first situation, if the directors prepare the report, so the subject matter has been summarized as subject matter information in the report. So the assurance is over the summarized information in the internal control report, which is the normal case in most of the countries. However, if the auditors are asked to provide assurance directly on the internal control effectiveness, then in that situation, directors may not have such a report by themselves. Auditors will check the design and effectiveness of the internal control activities by themselves. So that's the difference. So in that situation, the subject matter will be the performance of the internal control, will be the activities rather than the reports. I'm not sure if you can see the difference here. Okay. Now let's go to the module 5, which should be very, very important actually, which is about the environmental sustainability and integrity reports, and also the assurance over them. Basically, in the profession, we call them the assurance over CSR reports or assurance over integrity reports. They are similar, but they are different. As you know, integrity reports will be the combination of the CSR report plus our conventional financial statements. Is that right? I just want to check if you are still following. Okay. So CSR report should be very, very important. It has been increasingly popular, especially for large organizations. It is also very, very important in Australia because we do have a lot of large proportion for the resource industry and also large proportion for financial services. Those industries are very pay a lot of attention in terms of CSR reporting. What we want to know here is for the CSR assurance, at this stage, they are still voluntary. So that means it's not required by the regulators. Even though the CSR reporting and also CSR assurance might be quite conventional in certain industries, like the environmental related industry, like the minings. So one thing we have to, not have to, but we should know is for a CSR reporting, usually the standards, the framework should be the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. So on the other hand, the assurance standards used for CSR assurance would be the ASAE 3000 series. If it is done internationally, that would be the international standards of assurance engagements. One more thing I want to raise attention here is, so if for assurance services on the CSR report, this could be done by the accounting professionals or could be done by the other industrial consultants, because this kind of assurance is reporting and assurance are totally voluntary. So if the assurance is done by the accounting professionals, accounting firms tends to use ASAE or ISAE 3000 series as assurance standards. But if it is done by the other industrial consultants, they do have the flexibility to use ISAE 3000 or other sort of standards for their assurance service. For example, ISO 900. So the thing is, when the audit profession develop the assurance and auditing standards, they adopt a very strict methodology. So, and also those standards have been very, very seriously, carefully designed and implemented. But if they are using other standards, the other standards might not be tailored for assurance services. They are probably more about the consulting service rather than assurance engagement. So from our perspective, so if you look at the assurance engagement for CSR reports, if the assurance standards is from the accounting perspective, if the provider is an accounting firm, yearly, this assurance, level assurance is limited unless the numbers could be well quantified. But if the assurance is provided by the industrial consultants, if the standards is from the other discipline, so we often could see high-level assurance because the consultants actually, how can I say that? The consultants would be very, very, could be quite flexible, could be quite, so the, let's say, okay, the training from the industry consultants would be more about consulting service rather than providing professional services regarding assurance. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So in the environmental assurance, so there might be two different types, two special types of services, which are very, very popular in Australia. The first one is a greenhouse gas emission assurance. So this has been highlighted by the International Standard Board's decisions in terms of these type of assurance standards. The other type, which is very also quite popular, quite important in Australia, is the assurance on the water reports. So in Australia, we have the special standards on this type of reports, which is ASAE 3610. So from those assurance standards, we could also see actually environmental or the CSR assurance is a very important part for consulting or for assurance services for accounting firms, and which is also very popular in the Australian community. Okay, so if you're interested in this part of knowledge, you could also do the extended readings. Okay, Module 6. We are about to finish this part, right? Module 6 is about the big data impact on the assurance. So the first thing is about the current e-business environment. In the e-business environment, and we all of us could feel actually, especially during this COVID-19 period, we are more relying on the e-business, right? So what has been the features of the e-business? Relying on data. And are there any particular risks there? A lot. So relying on the data and also substantial risks on the data disclosure. And also there will be substantial cybersecurity risks. So those considerations would actually make big challenge make big technical challenges to the auditors. And also in the e-business, e-commerce assurance, so there will be increasing importance on the internal control and test controls for the assurance practitioners. So in short, so data security is important in e-business. Data risk or cyber risk will be challenging for the reporting. So technical challenges should be carefully considered and also properly trained to the auditors if they want to do the assurance in this area. When auditors want to do the e-commerce assurance, they should pay special attention to the control issues, internal control issues, and data risk management issues. The other type of assurance we want to talk a little bit would be the continuous assurance, which is also linked to the e-business, e-commerce assurance as well. Because without support of the e-environment, without the support from the IT expertise, it's not possible for the companies to have a continuous disclosure. And also it's not possible for the auditors to do the continuous audit. So it also means, so the technical challenge to the profession is still need to be further developed. Last piece, forensic auditing. I would only have one question here. Maybe two questions. What is forensic auditing? Is this auditing or it is not an audit? Okay, I answer my question by myself. So forensic auditing has been given the name as auditing, however, is not an audit. So in normal cases, it's not an assurance, it's just a factual finding. So the procedures of investigate the fraud or criminal activities. So in practice, most of the forensic auditing is nothing about assurance, nothing about audit. It's more about the criminal investigation procedure or fraud investigation procedure. But of course, if assurance report will be issued, they could also add in the assurance service onto forensic audit as well. Okay, so those are our summary to those other assurance services as the coverage to lecture 12. I know those talk will be has been very brief, but I think by doing the extended reading by yourself, you will get more from this part. It's not exam in the final exam. However, we couldn't say this part is not important. Actually, they are very important. They are increasingly important for this profession, as we discussed in the beginning of this lecture. So now the focus of all the accounting firms has switched, has linked more to consulting or other assurance services rather than to the financial statement audit. Financial statement audit are still important, but the firms want to explore more revenue opportunities from other services as well. Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording for this part and leave the session. And then after a few minutes, let's say a 5 minutes break. After 5 minutes, let's come back to do the part 1 revision. Okay, so we are going to restart from, let's say 6:40. Okay, see you in 5 minutes.